virtually via Teams, we have Councilmember Wolfley and Councilmember Gardner.
Thank you so much. At this time, I will entertain a motion if there are any agenda additions, deletions, or amendments. Hearing none, we'll move forward to citizen participation. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Wanda Rogers, Greater Bowie Chamber of Commerce. Good evening.
Good evening. And good evening, council members. So my name is Wanda Rogers, and I picked a perfect night to come. And I'm the president of the Greater Bowie Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. 40 years ago, a group of business people came together with the intention of creating a better business representation in Bowie and surrounding areas. A vision that has continued and thrived after numerous mayors, council members, after an economic meltdown in the early 2000s, a worldwide pandemic, and there's been a lot of change over the last 40 years as well. We have seen the growth of over 3,000 businesses in the greater Bowie area. We have also seen a change in population size and demographics of our city and surrounding communities. Who would have imagined that our city would one day be the largest municipality in Prince George's County and the 5th largest in the state of Maryland? I like to refer to Bowie as the crown jewel of Prince George's County, and we are. Located close to DC, Baltimore, and Virginia, what better place to live, work, and play? With all that has happened over the past 40 years, the Greater Bowie Chamber of Commerce continues to educate, advocate, and connect businesses. And we thank the City of Bowie for being our partner throughout. In recognition of our 40th year, our goals are to increase membership by clarifying our value proposition, continue to provide thought-provoking leadership training, advocate for our membership, ensuring that they are aware of the decisions that impact them, and ensuring the citizens of Bowie are aware that they have a Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber has a dynamic board of directors, and I want to specifically name our 4 newest board members. Eric Chapman, the co-founder and CEO of Sigel, a cybersecurity consulting firm. Candy Daly, CEO and co-founder of the Potomac Hospitality Group, or better known as Miss Ruby's Restaurant. Veronica Fountain, the publisher and founder of Simply Magazines, which includes Simply Bowie, Simply Alexandria, and Simply Annapolis. And lastly, Michael White, a leasing representative from St. John Properties. With that, I thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening, and on behalf of the Greater Bowie Chamber of Commerce, we look forward to continuing our partnership with the City of Bowie for many years to come. Thank you very much.
We will now move on to presentations.
We don't have any this evening, Mayor.
No presentations. So we will now go to city boards and committees. Please bear with us. This that time of the year, and we have a little bit of work to do here. So first, Ms. Betty Demps was interviewed on July 3rd for appointment to the Community Recreation Committee. Council concurred to appoint her to the committee as a member for a 2-year term. I will open the floor to please move to appoint her.
So moved.
Second.
It's been so moved and second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to appoint to the Arts Committee Ms. Kathleen Parker.
Second.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Seth, we have one more for Ms. Nicole Thornton before we get to
Yes,
the
I was about to.
reappointments.
Move through, okay. Ms. Nicole Thornton was interviewed on July 3rd for appointment to the Education Committee. Council concurred to appoint her to the committee as a member for a 2-year term.
So moved,
I
Mr.
open
Mayor.
the floor to please move to appoint her.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, the motion carries. We'll now go on to committee reappointments. If council concurs to reappoint the following members of the Administrative Review Board for another 2-year term, please move to reappoint them. Linda Fuller, Valerie Yancey, and John Skoulios.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to appoint Linda Fuller, Valerie Yancey, and John Skoulios to the Administrative Review Board.
I second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. If council concurs to reappoint the following member of the Arts Committee for another 2-year term, please have Councilmember Esteve move to reappoint her. Kathleen Parker.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to appoint Kathleen Parker to the Arts Committee.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. If council concurs to reappoint the following members of the Board of Personnel Appeals for another 2-year term, please move to reappoint them. Gail Elkins, Jacqueline Roan, and Tiffany Monrose.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to appoint Gal Enkins, Jacqueline Roan, and Tiffany Monrose to the Board of Personnel Appeals.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. If council concurs to reappoint the following members to the Diversity Committee for another 2-year term, please have Councilmember Hawkins move to reappoint them. And that is Brittany Bunn and B. Scott. The Diversity Committee.
I move to reappoint, what were the names again?
Brittany Bunn
Brittany Bunn
and B. Scott.
and B. Scott to the Diversity Committee?
Yes.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. If council concurs to reappoint the following members to the Economic Development Committee for another 2-year term, please have Councilmember Gardner move to reappoint them. That's Candy Daly, Kevin Kennedy, Sherman Ragland, Andrew Roud, and Alicia Stokes.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to appoint Candy Daly, Kevin Kennedy Jr., Sherman Ragland, Andrew Rowd, and Alicia.
Gardner is,
It's fine.
huh?
You can go forward. I don't think he has to.
Is Henri
Okay.
Gardner here?
Go ahead.
I'd like to move to reappoint Candy Daly, Kevin Kennedy Jr., Sherman Ragland, Andrew Rowd, and Alicia Stokes to the Economic Development Committee.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. If council concurs to reappoint the following members to the Environmental Advisory Committee for another 2-year term, please have Councilmember Wolfley move to reappoint them. Elmer Dengler and Jacqueline Lord, I don't believe he's available. Is someone with?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to appoint Elmer Dengler and Jacqueline Lord to the Environmental Advisory Committee.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. If council concurs to reappoint the following members to the Ethics Commission for another 2-year term, please move to reappoint them. Ismael Vince Canales, John P. J. Fagan Jr., Alan Kolsky, Carl Stemmer, and Daniel Thomas.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to appoint Ishmael Canales, John Fagan, Dr. Alan Kolsky, Carl Stamer, and Daniel Thomas to the Ethics Commission.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carried. If council concurs to reappoint the following member to the Financial Advisory Committee for another 2-year term, please have council move to reappoint him. Carl Robinson.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to appoint Carl Robinson to the Financial Advisory Committee.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. If council concurs to reappoint the following members to the Green Team Executive Committee for another 2-year term, please move to reappoint them. Robert Kellaway and Michael Laguna. Councilmember Gardner.
So moved.
It's been moved
Second.
and second. It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none. And call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. If council concurs to reappoint the following members to the Information Technology Committee for another 2 years, please have Mayor Pro Tem move to appoint them. John Idesnes and Michael Gregory Paynes.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. If council concurs to reappoint the following members of the Public Safety Committee for another 2-year term, please have Councilmember Hawkins move to reappoint them. Langston Clay and Jeffrey G. Cooper.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries.
Mayor, you missed number 4, Community Outreach Committee.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to appoint Ms. Sharon Hunt to the Community Outreach Committee.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. I would like to, at this time, swear in Ms. Betty Demps and Nicole Thornton. Ms. Demps, if you could, and please come to the mic. Mayor Pro Tem. Please raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Betty Demps,
I, Nicole Thornton,
Do swear or affirm
do swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
and that I will be faithful
and that I will be faithful
and bear true allegiance
and bear true allegiance
to the state of Maryland
to the state of Maryland,
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and that I will,
and that I will,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully,
diligently and faithfully,
without partiality or prejudice,
without partiality or prejudice,
execute the office of regular and member of the, and state the committee.
Execute the office and member of the Community Recreation Committee.
And the Education Committee.
Okay. According to the Constitution
According to the Constitution
and the laws of the state.
and the laws of the state.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Please come forward. Please come forward. Ms. Betty Demps, here you go. And congratulations. And Ms. Thornton, here you go. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you for serving.
At this time, we will now move on to council announcements. If I could, I'd like to first congratulate the scholarship winners from the Bowie Interfaith. That happened a little earlier this evening. Congratulations to all of them. And I'd like to say belated happy 4th of July. Thank you. At this time, any other comments from council members? Hearing none, we will now move on to the city manager's report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I have no report tonight. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We will now move to the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. We'll now move on to the old business, and that's adoption of an ordinance 0823, granting a renewal of a cable franchise to Comcast of Maryland, LLC, and authorizing franchise agreement. We will open that to public hearing and possibly public action at this time. I'll turn it over to staff.
Good evening, council and residents. I'm Maddie Bizzurdo. I am the Director of Business Operations, and I'm here to ask that you approve Ordinance 823. The city, in collaborations with the county and with other municipalities, have been negotiating with Comcast for many years, and finally, we have come to a very good negotiation, a good agreement, and we would like for you to approve this. As part of our negotiation team, we had Mr. Tim Lay from BBK, who is here, and he is going to give you a presentation on some of the highlights of the agreement. So I present to you Mr. Tim Lay.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Pleasure to be here tonight. It's in your packet as a PowerPoint, a duplicate of this PowerPoint for the public too. So I won't really read it. It's sort of one of my pet peeves about PowerPoints, that people just stand up and read them, and I really don't want to do that. A little bit of background. The city's last franchise was originally granted in '99 for a period of 15 years through 2014, I think early 2015, actually. Negotiations have been going on off and on between the city and the county and the other county municipalities and Comcast during that period. During that period, there were also a lot of changes in federal law, and there were a lot of disputes about the meaning of federal cable TV law as well, which sort of slowed down the negotiations. But we finally got a little more clarity in 2020, I believe, after a court of appeal, 21 actually, after appeal of an FCC decision. And after that, we were managed to reach agreement with Comcast. The most important things, and it's a rather long agreement, particularly when you add in the exhibits, among the most important things about the agreement is it preserves what the city already had in its prior agreement, which was a lot, and that's important because the basic trend line of law is most cities now are trying to hold on as best they can what they already have in a cable franchise. There's not a lot of room in the law to sort of improve what you have, although the draft in front of you does improve some of the things. It preserves the basic good parts of the past franchise and improves in a few specific areas. It also preserves the city's institutional network, which was negotiated as part of the original franchise agreement for the same length of term of this renewal franchise, which will be 10 years through July 2033. This is just a point of the basic, some of the fundamental points in the agreement. I will be walking through those generally as I go through the individual slides, so I won't repeat them here. You'll also see that here, this again repeats the background I already had, and these were our negotiating goals. I think they're fairly straightforward goals. Basically maximize the benefits to the city and to the city's residences and businesses from the franchise. We also had to, we wanted to make sure that it also was consistent with applicable law, so it wouldn't be subject to challenge, or at least to reduce the likelihood of a successful challenge. And also, of course, the city has multiple franchisees. Verizon is also a cable franchisee, and its franchise will be coming up behind this one. And we were also wanted to make sure that the terms of this franchise, that we treated all franchise providers fairly, and that will come up in our negotiations with Verizon, which were sort of on hold until we had the agreement with Comcast. We have a lot of summary slides, and I'll be talking about these as we go along, so I'll move along. One of the exhibits is a substantial list of customer service protection provisions, consumer protection provisions in the agreement. That's one of the exhibits. We take the FCC's customer service standards, which were adopted 20 years ago, and the law allows a city to impose more rigorous standards than the FCC standards if it wishes, and we have clarified the FCC standards and I believe improved them in certain respects. One of the things to keep in mind is enforcement is a very important thing in the franchise, and we've also beefed up the enforcement provisions as well for that reason. On the issue of public educational and governmental access channels, we preserve the current number, as you'll see in the agreement. The total number is 11 channels. The county has 8 channels. Each municipality can have up to 3 if they wish. The city will have 3. It already has 1 high-definition PEG channel, and the agreement allows at least 1 more PEG high-definition channel under the new agreement. It also preserves the franchise fee. I probably skipped over those, but those are the financial parts. In addition to the capacity, it also has customer service standards, which I spoke about, so let's go past that. The institutional network provisions. The institutional network, which the city has had since 99, or it was constructed shortly thereafterwards, is basically a broadband communications network that the city and other public institutions can use as their own internet or broadband network to communicate among different city locations and also to communicate among the schools, police and fire as well, and state offices in the jurisdiction if they choose to join it. So it's sort of an internal communications network, and it's not video necessarily like the cable system is. It's just basically an internet broadband network. The one problem with that is the original structure, because that's the way institutional networks were structured under the Cable Act, is Comcast owns the physical network. The city had an indefeasible right of use to use that capacity on the network along with all the other Prince George's jurisdictions. One of the changes that the FCC ordered in the meantime was that going forward, the value of the institutional network would count against the 5% cap that the Cable Act places on the franchise fees that the cable operator pays a local jurisdiction. So that was a bit of a, Comcast took the position that that meant if the city wanted to continue receiving the institutional network, the retail value of what it would charge a business customer to provide that would be offset against the 5% franchise fee, which would eat up a huge part about it. We had quite a bit of back and forth on that, but in the end, Comcast agreed that would not happen here, primarily because the city had an indefeasible right of use under the prior agreement, and we argued that that goes on in perpetuity, whether Comcast likes it or not, under the terms of the old agreement. We settled on the solution was to have the institutional network would continue as it is for another 10 years. Because of the FCC's ruling, the maintenance cost, only the incremental maintenance costs, the jurisdictions would be responsible for. But in fact, the 3% PEG fee that the agreement provides for Comcast to pay the city can use the funds, if to the extent it wishes, to pay for the institutional network maintenance requirements, which aren't really that great. It's far less than 3%. As when I get to the financial slides, I'll show. Basically, this is designed, and here are the payments. These are the totals for the county and all the jurisdictions. First year one is $185,000. Bowie's share would just be its pro capita of county, total county population of that, so it would be significantly smaller than that. And that's the only cost for the institutional network for the next 10 years to the city. The whole idea is within 10 years, the city already has its own sort of internal network. The idea is to migrate the current institutional network traffic needs that the city is using to its own network and to the county fiber network over that 10-year period. That way you avoid the problem of having to rely upon Comcast for the physical network and for them taking the position that after 10 years, they're going to charge you a commercial rate to keep using it. So it's really sort of a 10-year transition, but that gives you a long runway to move, which in the direction that I understand the city already is, and that's to have its own network that it controls for its internal communications needs. I don't know how big an issue this is for Bowie as opposed to the county, but one area that was also improved in the agreement was build-out requirements. Those are the requirements, the minimum requirements that a cable operator has to build out its system to serve customers with a standard installation charge. The Comcast will have the obligation to do that in any area that has at least a density of 20 homes per plant mile, and also to extend any home within 350 feet of the line that goes down the street. Those are actually significantly above the or superior to the standard provisions you'll find in most franchise agreements around the country. I spoke a little bit about the financial commitments before. As I mentioned, the Cable Act allows the locality to charge a franchise fee up to a maximum of 5% of the cable operator's cable service revenues, and the renewal franchise agreement does that. The gross revenue definition is really what matters, and the gross revenue definition has been tweaked some since the earlier one, and I think improve it. There obviously are some issues that cable operators and localities have a difficulty agreeing upon whether they should be included or not included in the gross revenues. The primary one in the negotiation here has to do with streaming video services, which have not been classified yet. It's not something that you could expect the operator and the city to agree right now at this point, whether those are in or out. What we agreed to do is have language in the gross revenue definition that to the extent that those services are in fact cable services within the meaning of the Cable Act, which has not yet been determined, they will be in the franchise fee base that the city will receive payment from. This will not totally alleviate the problem, the gross revenue problem that the city will face in the next 10 years, because over time, due to cord cutting, the city probably, how much money it receives in the 5% cable franchise fee is probably already flattening out and will probably fall some over the next 10 years. And that is sort of unavoidable because the Cable Act limits the fee base, the revenue base, to cable service fees. So that means that broadband services and telecom services that Comcast provides, the revenues it receives from that cannot be included in the 5% franchise fee base. We argued otherwise, local governments did before the FCC and the courts, but they did not agree with us on that. As I mentioned earlier, the franchise also imposes a 3% PEG capital support fee. Under the Cable Act, only cost for PEG capital equipment and facilities are an exception to the franchise fee. Any other fees that the city imposes count against the franchise fee, 5% cap. As I mentioned earlier, Comcast has agreed to treat the maintenance costs paid on the INET as PEG capital costs, and therefore the city can pay out of the 3% fee to meet its obligations for the amounts of the institutional network fees. So that was a significant savings for the city there. And also the city, I think it's fair to say that not many cities across the country have a 3% PEG fee. I think frankly, the county and the Prince George's County communities and Montgomery County and its communities are probably the only major jurisdictions in the country that have an agreement to keep getting 3% PEG fees for 10 more years in the country. The franchise also has public building service requirements of courtesy service to public buildings. Largely, the current sites will continue to be served. Comcast has agreed to not charge for those connections, at least for now, although on notice under the FCC's order of 2019, it could technically charge the charge the city the incremental costs of the free drops and free services it provides to city locations, but Comcast has agreed that it will not do that, certainly starting out in the franchise, and it won't do it without giving notice to the city so the city can decide whether it wants to pay incremental costs or just drop those services. And that covers it. I did want to highlight a couple of things before I signed off, because I think it was an earlier slide that I glossed right over. One major issue for the city, and in fact for all the jurisdictions in the county, but particularly in the city, is Comcast has a rather disturbing habit of sort of leaving wires and unkempt boxes along streets and next to people's yards. And we've greatly strengthened the provisions prohibiting Comcast from doing that and imposing greater penalties on Comcast if it does, and also giving the city the right to, if Comcast doesn't respond or repair those or eliminate that equipment, that sort of basically abandoned equipment, the city has the right to do it itself and then bill Comcast for the cost of doing that. And that's basically the overview of it. I look forward to questions. I'll come back up after you have the public hearing to answer any questions that the mayor and the council members may have. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Go ahead, Michael.
No, I was just going to say a huge thank you in particular for the abandoned equipment part. That's been a huge challenge, especially with the storms we've had recently. I've learned more about who owns what wires in the sky than I ever want to know in my life, and so thank you for that. And a big thank you to Ms. Pizzuto for your work on this as well.
Sure.
Hey, thank you. Any other comments? All right, thank you. At this time, I will call the public hearing open. Do we have any testimony?
No, Mayor, no one signed up to speak this evening.
At this time, I'll call the public hearing closed. And at this time, I will ask council members if they have any questions at this time.
Oh, no questions, but if we're ready, I'd like to move to adopt O-8-23.
Okay, one moment. Any questions from anyone? Any comment? I would like to say thank you, though, for coming up. One thing that I will say somewhat tongue-in-cheek, it said that the costs will be competitive because we have 2 carriers here. Does that mean it wouldn't be competitive if we didn't have to?
You're more competitive than average. Some people would say a duopoly isn't really competition, so it's not like a classic competition, but 2 is probably better than 1, all things being equal.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I will at this time entertain a motion regarding, bear with me, ordinance 0823 granting a renewal of a cable franchise to Comcast of Maryland and authorizing the franchise agreement.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to adopt ordinance O-8-23.
Second. It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. We will now move on to new business. City lobbyist briefing.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening we have representatives from Cornerstone, the city's lobbyist firm. They'll be giving us an overview of the 2023 legislative session and the result of different bills that the city was looking at this season.
Thank you.
The team will come on up, introduce yourselves.
Good evening. All right, great. We're up here.
And if you could, just lift the mic up, whatever you're comfortable
Sure.
with, move it wherever you like. Please, feel free.
Sure, absolutely. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, council members and staff. Thank you for having us here this evening. My name is Dolores Sanchez-Ficalche, and I'm joined by my colleagues with Cornerstone Government Affairs. We're pleased to be here with you this evening to provide a post-session report, and we're honored to represent the city of Bowie before the Maryland Legislature in Annapolis. So we can actually advance this slide here. Oh, it's the clicker? Wonderful. Uh-oh. Well, while we're doing that, we have Ellen Valentino Smith, Mr. Chris Hughes, and PJ Hogan also with me. PJ's going to start off with our budget breakdown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. One of the big items this session was, and always is, the budget. If we rewind the tape back to mid-December, the state was looking at a significant budget surplus. Unfortunately, very shortly after the legislature convened, the Department of Legislative Services issued a report, and they determined there was a miscalculation in the formula for that, what's known as the blueprint funding for education. This is all the state funding that goes to K through 12 throughout the state. And that miscalculation amounted to about $500 million. So it was going to cost the state about $500 million more than they had anticipated. So that was the first hit. The second hit occurred in about the middle of March. Quarterly, the Board of Revenue Estimates for the state looks at future projected revenues from all the different revenue sources of the state, and they update those revenue projections. They wrote down the revenues, $474 million. So to use round figures between those two items and inflation on a series of capital projects, that basically took $1 billion away from the state. That made the budget decisions that the legislature had to make, and the governor, much tougher. Let's not forget this was the first year of a new gubernatorial administration. Governor Moore was sworn in on January 18th, I think was the date. The budget was submitted on January 20th. He really didn't get a chance to build the budget. It was based on work that had been done by the previous administration. We worked with the administration, lobbied the administration, trying to get some projects funded for the city. There were not the supplemental budgets that either Governor Moore was hoping to do or that we were hoping. In the end, when the budget finally passed, we're able to secure an additional $500,000 for tubercation. I can never, ever pronounce it. The bad pipes. I prefer to say it that way. It made it a real challenge. So that is the budget in a nutshell of what occurred during the last session.
All right, that takes us right into tuberculation funding. Yes, thank you very much. I did practice that before I showed up this evening, believe it or not. It doesn't show. So the result is that we did get $500,000 funded for that request after working with the budget committees. Again, this was something we were hoping to get into the budget as it was introduced. We were assisted by Delegate Jazz Lewis and the House Appropriations Chair, Mr. Ben Barnes. So those dollars will be coming to the city to begin, or to continue, in fact, the work that the city has been doing currently on that. We do have several initiatives in play currently to continue to try to draw down dollars for that, either through federal infrastructure that's going into the Maryland Department for the Environment. There's also some other administrative agencies that we're currently investigating right now to determine if we can also get additional dollars in the current budget year for that. So those are meetings that we're hoping to have with the council to discuss further.
Horse racing, like in previous years, took a front and center stage during this Maryland General Assembly. There was a bill that passed that created a new thoroughbred racing operating authority in the Maryland Operations Fund. And it really is for the purpose of looking forward on how the state is going to deal with, secure, and try to keep horse racing a part of economic growth. It was a commitment by Governor Moore. On September 6th, he appointed the commission. It's being run by Greg Cross. And where Bowie fits into this is, yes, the conveyance of the Bowie racetrack has been delayed 1 year. Additionally, though, the money that was initially funded for that conveyance went from $1 million to $1.5 million. So that delay is underway, but like I said, there's another $500,000 there. In addition to that, there has been $100,000 granted to do a survey of the property if the city can come to terms accessing that property prior to 2024. There are recommendations that are due to the General Assembly December 1st of this year that I think significantly could have a path forward with other policy decisions here that may impact Bowie, and we certainly expect it to impact the state. So that is what happened with horse racing.
All right, I'm Christopher Dews. Once again, thank you, members of the council. I'm actually just here to finish this up. So last but not least, we had a variety of other bills that did manage to pass. We had the cannabis legislation that also passed that we have not talked about already. A transfer in the pension system that happened with the city of Bowie. I know there were some officers that had discussed their inability to transfer their pensions. There was a piece of legislation initiated by Senator Michael Jackson that did manage to pass this session. And then lastly, which was a large priority for the Maryland Municipal League now 2 years in a row, which was the ability for the municipalities to create their own police accountability boards. That bill did not manage to get out of committee this year, but I'm sure it is going to be put up again next year. That is actually the end of this presentation. The next slide is just any questions that members of the council may have. So the team is open. Thank you for the time.
First, I'd like to thank you for coming in this evening and kind of giving us a view of what went on during the session. So we appreciate the efforts. I know coming down, and we've had some of those conversations, and as the budget changed and as our delegation was working hard to support us, we know that we faced a lot of challenges down there. We truly did. I can remember sitting in our senator's office when we got the word of the write-down on revenues and things of that nature, as we just kind of went, oh boy, here we go. So having said that, I appreciate the efforts that you presented. And at this time, I would like to see if any of my colleagues have any questions at this time.
Thank you,
Councilman
Mr.
Hawkins.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good to see you all. Thank you all for stopping by and presenting to us today. Wanted to talk more about the budget and not necessarily what happened last session, but is there any indication or any foresight into where we'll be looking with regards to the budget next year? Are we going to run into another issue with regard to a budget hole that may appear out of nowhere, or are things kind of stabilized some and allow us to, advocate more?
I'm afraid that two things may happen. I keep hearing rumors of a continuous budget write-down. Frankly, I'm a little stymied by that because the economy does seem to be doing okay. It's not okay for everyone, but relative to other states, Maryland economy is doing okay. But I keep hearing rumors about additional write-downs. And then, I don't know if any of you followed the national news, part of the Federal Debt Ceiling Act, the deal that was struck to raise the debt ceiling, there's a provision in there that will claw back some of the COVID money. If you remember, during the years of COVID, one of the reasons Maryland's budget was in great shape prior to that, like most states, there was all this federal money coming down. Between COVID acts and the Infrastructure Act, the IJA Act, but part of that debt ceiling deal, the feds are going to claw back some of the state dollars. Problem is, nobody knows exactly what yet. There's a lot of those federal dollars that actually have never gone to states, so it could be a matter of just deauthorizing some of it. All that being said, that doesn't mean the city of Bowie, and we shouldn't, be as aggressive as possible with the new administration. Kind of still a new administration. This next budget will be the first one Governor Moore, his administration puts together from scratch. So we think we should be aggressive with our requests. Also, the legislature has a new power that just was given to them from the constitutional amendment from the last election, and this past session was the first time they could exercise that power. Prior to this, a governor would introduce the budget, legislature could only cut. They couldn't add, they couldn't even move money around. And frankly, the ability to add money was how the legislature, thank you, Delegate Holmes, was actually able, they actually added $500,000 into the budget specifically for Bowie for this project. That wasn't possible before. They didn't do a lot of that. I think they're no disrespect, I think they're crawling before they're going to walk, before they're going to run, getting used to this new authority.
The only thing I would add is I think there's going to be a tremendous issue with the Transportation Trust Fund. Could impact the Transportation Trust Fund. I think there's going to be a significant deficit and issue growing in the state. I think it's headline news shortly thereafter, and it'll be interesting to see. Even though that's held separate and apart from the budget, it's an important component, I think, to how you guys plan forward. So it's just something to think about.
I know, real quick, I'd just like to make a statement, and I think I speak on behalf of the council. Hopefully, this summer, soon, we can have a strategic meeting as we can list out and lay out what the needs are and what we're looking to do so that we can get a very early start on being able to talk and share with our delegation what we're looking for, and then have a much earlier meeting with the delegation so that they'll know what we're looking at this year. We usually wait kind of late in the year, but I'd like to do that very early on this year with council's concurrence. So thank you. And Madam Pro Tem?
Thank you. I just have 3 questions. First of all, thank you for coming out. Great work this session. We really appreciate the support and the partnership we've been able to foster with Cornerstone. 3 questions on things that you've mentioned in the presentation. The first one is on federal funding. You just spoke a little bit about that. My question to you is, do you feel like we are positioning ourselves in the best way to leverage our, when that federal funding starts to trickle down from the state to the county to the municipality, do you feel like we're positioning ourselves in the best way to be able to leverage and take advantage of that when it starts to flow? Or are there any recommendations that you would make to us to change our posture to be in a better positioning? That's my first question.
I think the answer is yes, we are. We're starting to identify federal programs, especially under the Infrastructure Act. There's a lot of money in that's not part of the clawback. And whether that's for water and sewer, transportation needs, those are the 2 that really focus on.
Awesome. And then the second part is, based on your learnings from this last session, do you see or did you learn of any gaps in terms of the things that we might be asking for, other areas that we should be focusing on more based on what you know to be our priorities and anything that you learned coming out of the session?
I didn't really see any, Delora, I didn't see any gaps, but I want to underscore what the mayor said, and I know we've had this discussion with a number of you. The key is early. Let's make early decisions, early strategy, and really coordinate with the delegation and get to the governor early. I'll give you a time frame. Governors start putting their fiscal 25 budget together really August through December. By Christmas Eve, that budget is put to bed. It has gone to the printer. It may not be introduced until January 18th, but decisions have been made. And the sooner we can make those decisions and all be on the same page with priorities, the better.
I just would just kind of underscore that what the mayor has mentioned, starting early, and PJ has also mentioned. But in addition is really looking at very closely at the agencies, having those discussions with the secretaries, because as you mentioned, the Infrastructure Act and the dollars that are coming down, they are coming to the agencies. And those are the ways where we can not just look at the budget that's put together by the governor, but also take a look at those agency dollars that are available to the city of Bowie. So there's more than one way to kind of look for those dollars, and we intend to leave no stone unturned.
Yeah, last question, and just to echo on your point, Delora, one of the great meetings that you put together for myself and Councilmember Esteb earlier was about the workforce development and the funding that's available there to municipalities for pre-built. Like, that was really insightful. So now I think for us, trying to figure out like where to go with that conversation is probably the next step, but that was really helpful in how you helped us pivot there to be able to have better conversations at the cabinet level. So I appreciate that. The last question is on a comment that was made about kind of alluded to about the racetrack for Ellen. My question is just a clarification. Are the funds contingent on the city getting access prior to 2024? Is that what you were alluding to in the presentation? Or, because you mentioned something about access and the funds being dependent on access, us being able to get access to the property. So are the funds contingent on that?
There's $100,000 that's available now, should the city come to terms with their ability to access that property.
And if the city is not able to, then that means that we just wouldn't be able to access that funding.
I believe that that's the way that the non-codified language reads. I don't know if you want to clarify on that.
If I can clarify a little bit. That doesn't mean the city has to take the property. But the mayor and others, we've been through a lot of, there's an access agreement that the owners are requesting be signed. That doesn't commit you to take the property. But what's the $100,000 that's specifically in there is to do an environmental impact study to determine what's on the property. We've talked about this before. Look, if I were in your shoes, I would have the study done, find out what's on the property, then you can make an informed determination what you want to do. But the clock was extended a year as far as the transfer of the property, if that was to happen. So, that deadline you were facing, that's been extended. So there's time to do the work.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Any other questions at this time?
Mayor?
Councilmember Wolfe, did you have a question?
Yes, a quick question. First of all, and a comment. First of all, thank you everybody for making the effort to be with us this evening and the great work that you and your organization have pursued on our behalf. So thank you very much. Quick question, a follow-up on the discussion or the comment made about the oversight boards not getting out of committee. Can you provide a little bit more insight into what the issues were there and what the prognosis is for next year?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I believe I wrote those specific issues down. First of all, when I went back and watched the House hearing and made a couple of phone calls, it wasn't necessarily the House that I was, I don't know which way I should look here, but it wasn't necessarily the House that had the issue, but I do want to acknowledge that it was the Senate that seemed to have a lot of concerns when the bill was in its specific hearing. And the issues that they had mentioned mostly had to do with, mostly just had to do with how it was going to be allocated. I want to say that at the time, the chairman specifically did not want any, how do I say this properly? That the chairman did not necessarily want any changes on the municipality level. I believe there was a lot of kind of terse upsetness at the fact that when this bill originally passed in 2021, that the city municipalities were not actually involved in that conversation, but he just thought that it would be a little bit too much for that specific session. Now, what I was informed was that conversations with MACO and MML would be occurring during the interim so that they could figure out a proper next steps for next year. I also want to say that there was some confusion about whether or not this bill would be mandatory. I know that the way the language was actually constructed, it was not mandatory for each municipality. I believe there's 88 that would qualify for this. It was not mandatory. Some legislators thought that it should be mandatory, some did not. There was also the conversation that I believe I heard about whether or not specific entities could stack the board. So who determines who gets on there, and is it possible that certain individuals could kind of put their own people on there and kind of drive the conversation in one direction. So that is what I know from the conversations that had happened. I have not yet heard of a proper step forward. I just know that the chairman of the committee did say he was going to meet with members of MML and members of MACO prior to session 2024. Hope that answers the question, Councilman.
It did. Thank you very much. And I haven't had a chance to talk to our city attorney, who is quite heavily involved in the MML. And I expect that they will continue to pursue this on our behalf as well as the rest of the municipalities. So hopefully we can get to some point of resolution next time around. Thank you again for your time and effort on this.
You got it. Thank you.
Any other questions from council members?
Just want to say a big thank you to the Cornerstone team. The City of Bowie's worked with a lot of different lobbyists over the years, and I have to say I've done this for 8 years. This has been probably one of the most organized we've been as a city, working with our lobbyists and making sure we had regular communications. I really appreciated taking the time to meet every Monday and put up with our questions, often the same questions every Monday. But the communication was excellent. The work in Annapolis was excellent. I hear very good things from lawmakers about you guys, which is very good since they're the ones that you guys are, working with. Would it be best for us to try and meet with you guys in August or in September to do our planning for this upcoming session, or July?
August.
August, okay.
August 1st? No.
Okay.
Sooner the better. Yeah. Let everybody go on vacation.
Okay. I don't know if we need to do a council poll or something to try and find a date in August that works for folks. But if we can try and get a majority together, that'd be.
I think that's the plan. We'll work through city staff and find what day accommodates the majority of the council to be able to do that.
Great. Thank you.
We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hey, thank you again. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, again, thank you, and we're going to make sure we get our requests in early and press hard. Right, Delegate? I'd like to acknowledge Delegate Holmes for being here this evening, and also Councilwoman Watson for being here this evening. Now I'd like to move on to the item B, which is the Racetrack Property Task Force recommendations. The chair of the Bowie Racetrack Property Task Force will present the final findings and recommendations of the task force regarding future recreational uses of the Bowie Racetrack property. We'll have a public hearing, and then it is eligible for action. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Robert Day. I am the chair of the Bowie Racetrack Task Force. My counterpart, co-chair Derek Cooley, is hiding back there. Wave there, Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the council for providing us with the opportunity to present the findings and recommendations of the Bowie Racetrack Task Force. I would like to emphasize the significance and immense potential that this task force was faced with, not only with the charge that was given by the council, but in fostering a true town-gown relationship between the city and the Bowie State University, which will undoubtedly impact the city in the future. The primary objective of the task force was to gather public input and develop vision for the future recreational use of 118 acres of the Bowie Racetrack Task Force property in collaboration with Bowie State University. To achieve this, we conducted a comprehensive public survey which gathered input from 2,675 community members. Additionally, we organized 2 public workshops and held 5 task force meetings, with the final meeting being on June 29th. All the information and data collected throughout the process has been made available on the city's project webpage. The extensive shareholder engagement and the diversity with the task force fostered a highly collaborative and inclusive work environment. I entrusted the task force with a responsibility of envisioning how this location could fulfill the council's charge, encourage members to think without financial constraints, which was tough, while recognizing the importance and the preservation of the site's historical significance and revitalization, that it would be a betterment for our community. I'm confident that you will recognize and appreciate the tremendous effort put forth by this task force. Before I pass the floor over to Joe, I want to elaborate on our findings and recommendations. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to our task force members, many of which are sitting out here today, to the city staff for their great support, and to Park and Planning for their unwavering support and active involvement, and the trust throughout the duration of this task force work. Once again, I extend my gratitude to all of you for your valuable time and attention to this issue. Thank you, and now I'm going to pass it off to Joe and let him do our slideshow and presentation.
Good evening, council members. I'm Joe Meinert, the planning director, and I'd just like to provide an overview of the product that was produced by the task force. First of all, I'd like to thank our consultant, who's not with us today, Jim Klein, with Lardner Klein Landscape Architects. He provided a lot of great assistance to the task force and walked them through a very difficult process, and I think the product that I'm going to present to you tonight is reflective of a lot of cooperation. The recommended concept plan is what we're calling it, as a result of a lot of public input, as Chairman Day has said. We did hold 2 public workshops, conducted the survey, and did complete the mission that was given to the task force in the council resolution. Our outreach resulted in reviewing the results of the questionnaire, the workshop attendance, and all of the feedback that we got from the public. We also had a briefing from Park and Planning concerning their countywide demand study, which was recently completed for the northern and central portions of the county. So that was very timely information for the task force to consider. We also considered the input from the Bowie State University faculty regarding their program needs, as well as the city's own parks and recreation inputs. The top preferences, as you can see from the survey and community meetings, include a well-connected trail network, conservation of natural areas, picnicking areas, outdoor learning places, year-round restrooms, equestrian facilities, large rectangular fields, and agricultural facilities such as the farm-to-table urban agriculture. This slide very briefly shows how we have combined the results of all of those inputs and resulting in the priorities that I just mentioned being the common themes. One of the other tasks that the task force undertook was to develop some criteria for consideration of any future plans to be developed for the property. And this evaluation criteria consists of 12 factors which the task force believes should be considered in any future scope of services for a park master plan. And these factors include accessibility, land use compatibility, transportation capacity, addressing the recreational needs and following national standards, incorporating all of the inputs from the Bowie State University regarding their program needs, protecting the Patuxent River with sensitive development, addressing any environmental issues that may come to rise on the site, also providing financial feasibility as the project gets a little more detailed into the future, considering lighting and the impacts of lighting, addressing it through the dark sky standards, also construction access routes being done to minimize the impacts on the neighborhood, considerations for operations and management, and sustainability, building that into the future design plans. The task force was comprised of 3 subcommittees, and the subcommittees did spend time developing individual concepts, and those concepts were shared at the second public workshop. And what I'd like to do is just present for council a very brief overview of some of those concepts, and then we'll get to the recommended concept. The first theme was to look at, with an emphasis on casual use and conservation. So there was more of a focus on providing green spaces, to a lesser extent active recreation. There were certainly trail facilities and equestrian facilities, things, community supporting things such as the agricultural uses and reusing. If you can see that pink area in the middle of the slide there, that's the riding ring that was used with the stables on the west side of Racetrack Road, and there was a strong desire to keep that facility and use it for some type of community use. So this particular plan focused on casual uses and open space while providing a certain amount of recreation. As you see, there's a track and field zone in the center which would address some of the university's needs. And as I mentioned, trails throughout, picnicking areas, kayak areas, access to the water. Those were some of the themes in this first plan. The second plan provided a little bit more of an emphasis on meeting recreational demands, as we saw in the survey and data from Park and Planning that there is a need for certain types of facilities. Again, this plan maintains the track in the center of the area east of Racetrack Road. It provides a building. There's allowance for up to 50,000 square foot of building area. It also provides for rectangular fields within the center of the existing racetrack area, as well as courts on the east side, providing on the west side, the stable area, the Bowie State University run agricultural activities, as well as providing some space for community uses such as the farmers market, using that riding ring area that I had mentioned earlier. The third plan was one that had a stronger emphasis on expanding recreational opportunities, and this one I think was intended to address a wide range of recreational uses, including the university's programmatic needs. So you have the track and field area within the center of the property. You have the ROTC obstacle course shown in this plan, which is one of the priorities of the university. You also have a little bit more developed access coming in and providing on the east side access from both ends of the property. There's an equestrian museum and art zone and hard surface courts proposed in this plan on the west side of Racetrack Road. We took those 3 concepts to the public workshop, which was held at the Ken Hill Center on May 13th. got a lot of public input on all of the concepts. Some of the key takeaways from that meeting was that the equestrian uses needed to be a little bit more present on the site, more than just a museum. There was input from the cricket community, wanting to assure that some of the large areas of the site could be used for a possible cricket field, but noting that they were unsure of the status of the cricket field that was proposed at the National Capital Business Park. So there was, in a sense, a priority to try to look at something like that on this site. There was also concern generally about Racetrack Road, the current condition of the road, the dangerous curve in the road, the need to provide safe access to this property, as well as providing capacity and adequate turning. One of the other comments that we received was that residents felt that if Park and Planning was already providing for certain facilities, that we shouldn't duplicate that here, and so that we would try to find those uses that would not duplicate what was being done elsewhere. So in general, the comments favored a moderate level of recreational development. So the task force then focused on how those elements could be combined into a common design concept. Again, looking at the criteria and considering the criteria that the task force developed, some of these things helped to develop the eventual land use plan that was eventually adopted. The criteria about protecting the Patuxent River led us to providing, the trail system, a soft surface trail system, one that would not create a lot of impact. Also, considering things that could be done in the future that would mitigate or avoid some of the environmental issues on the property. So with that, there were these principles that were developed by the task force that would be used by a future consultant developing a master plan, conserving and restoring wetlands, floodplains, and riparian areas next to the river, maintaining the permeable surface or natural permeable surfaces on that side of the property near the river, rehabilitating the former pond area, which is as a meadow area. If you look at the aerial photograph here to the right of the screen, there's actually an old dated photograph of the racetrack when it was in use, and there was a centrally located wetland or pond area within the middle of the track. You can see there's even a picture of a boat floating on the water in that portion of the site. So one of the considerations was, as we go forward and the new project would involve or have a need for stormwater management and also future wetland creation, that this would be a really great opportunity to accomplish that. Transportation, the criteria that I mentioned was to try to provide sufficient capacity and limit the impacts on Racetrack Road. One of the design principles would be to incorporate a separated pedestrian bicycle facilities within the right-of-way. This Racetrack Road corridor is actually part of what the council has adopted as the Bowie Byway, which is the primary trail network throughout the city. So this presents a real opportunity, since the city would control land on both sides of Racetrack Road and could accomplish that design. And also incorporating the Patuxent River Trail as part of the secondary network, where you would have the natural surface trail available to users that would go along parallel to the river. Another design principle, and this is just an illustration here, is a cross-section of Racetrack Road, which would be developed potentially with a planted median and separated bike lanes on the outsides. And this would be something we'd have to work with Prince George's County Public Works Department on, and you'd probably want to include something in your future transportation priority list letters to encourage the county to start looking at this. As far as getting to the elements of the concept plan that's recommended, there are a few slides here to finish that discuss land uses, and there is a desire to be compatible with adjacent land uses such as the Saddlebrook community, both on the east side and the west side of Racetrack Road. Recreation, the criteria was to address those needs of both the city and the Bowie State University that have been identified following the appropriate standards. This plan, which is shown on the next few slides, it's the same drawing, but it identifies use areas, and I'll go from the stable side to the other side. Community use area, community gardens, the Bowie State University urban agricultural area would be in the stable portion of the site, and then reusing that riding ring that I mentioned for arts and history displays, and essentially readapting that covered pathway as a walking or display facility. On the east side of Racetrack Road, the racetrack itself would, the oval would be retained intact, but you would have the field sports area, the track and field areas in the center, which I had described in the previous slides. Also listing a number of other fields in this area. This would be the major large rectangular fields or large use field areas, including cricket. So we've included that in the bullet list there as an example. To the north of the field, track and field area would be the ROTC obstacle course area, which would be a secured area operated by the university. The building that would provide support and facilities to the property. You would have to the east a flexible and casual use area, which would be including uses such as picnicking, green space, meadows, shade trees, informal lawn games, and possibly an amphitheater. So these are the types of uses that are envisioned for this flexible casual use area. And then beyond that, as you get closer to the river to the east, conservation zone, and providing some access to the river for public canoeing and kayaking. And then below that, picnic and pavilion areas. I mentioned the preservation of the stormwater management area within the center where the lake the pond used to be located. And then you'd have some more active fields and court sports to the south. And just adjacent to the property is the Saddlebrook East Park, which is owned and operated by Park and Planning. And just to reiterate some of these uses and activities, again, the urban research area is recommended on the east or the western side of Racetrack Road. What was the former grandstand would be the flexible casual use areas. The track and field and courts would be within the center, including that meadow for stormwater management, and preserving the trail along the river and river access. These design principles that we would want to carry forward in any future master planning for this would be to recommend compatible uses adjacent to the neighbors, to utilize well-graded area within the track for fields and court sports, and treat stormwater management, as I said, by directing it to that former pond area. Also rehabilitating the stables as an urban farm research facility, providing community gardens, parking, restrooms. The grandstand, again, is, I'm starting to repeat myself, but that was recommended for casual use. And also incorporating the Bowie State University ROTC area just to the north of the track and field area. This map is really the last slide in the presentation. It is just the overall drawing that I've just described. One of the things that I didn't talk about was access to the property from Racetrack Road, and there was consideration of a road in one of the plans that would connect all the way through the west or the east side of the property, but what was settled upon was a separate access that would come in along the northern end of the property and would end in a cul-de-sac. There would also be preservation of the existing access through from Racetrack Road into the Saddlebrook East Park that would wrap around and also end in a cul-de-sac. But then, as you can see on this drawing, there's a separate roadway facility which would be a managed access lane, a driveway that would be allowed to be open and closed at various points in time for different events. And similar to how the road works within Allen Pond Park. If you drive by the ice rink at Allen Pond to get over to Mitchellville, there's managed access that can be opened or closed based on the types of activities that are underway on the property. What I'd like to do is conclude by referencing the staff report. We did have a couple of recommendations concerning this plan. The first is to be sure that the Urban Agriculture Research Farm and the community gardens be located in the stable area on the west side of Racetrack Road. You do have a copy of the specific recommendations, which is attachment 7 of the staff report. There's some specific items that the task force voted on at their last meeting, and attachment 7 is the listing of those. But what we felt was that the specific recommendations about the agriculture research farm were not as clear as far as the location. And we believe that having it on the west side in the stable area would be much more compatible with the adjacent neighborhood of Saddlebrook West, and that we would want to avoid any higher impact uses such as courts and things that would disrupt the neighborhood. So that's this first staff modification on the first page of the staff report. The second item relates to the equestrian theme, and there was a consideration at the last task force meeting about how to what extent equestrian activities should be included in the project. And we wanted to point out to council that we did get a lot of strong support both in the survey that we did and the community workshops from the equestrian community. And so we believe that it is in keeping with the heritage of the property that there be at least the potential in the future to have some additional equestrian activities on the site. I did mention earlier that we would want to reuse the riding ring on the west side and have some type of museums or interpretive facilities there. But what we're talking about here in our second modification is the potential for an outside user to come into the property that would operate equestrian facilities in the flexible casual use area, which is over in the sort of the northern area just beyond the track. And that those activities would be contingent upon and clearly linked to the participation from that external organization which would operate the uses with the city's permission. So essentially with that bulleted list that's there in the flexible casual use portion of the land use plan, we would want to just add a bullet that says equestrian activities, as approved by the city. And with those input comments concerning the land use plan, I can conclude one of the things we wanted to suggest to council is that council consider funding the preparation of a park master plan in the future, similar to what you've done for White Marsh Park and Allen Pond Park and Tanglewood Park. So you'd need the program budgets or funds in a future budget to do that. Also that we recommend that the city request Park and Planning coordinate a master planning effort on their adjacent Saddlebrook East property that would parallel the city's own master plan preparation, so facilities can be planned jointly. And also that we would consider asking Park and Planning to take over the portion of the site adjacent to the river as part of their regional trail system. So they already have a system they're developing, and this would just be an extension of that, connecting all the way up to their property at Horsepen Park. And so that would conclude the staff overview of the plan. Again, we believe that the task force has worked very hard on this. The recommendation to council is to approve the concept, accept the criteria and the principles that I've outlined, and the specific use recommendations in attachment 7 with the modifications that staff has suggested. And that concludes the staff presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to quickly say thank you to everyone who participated in this. I know it's been a great challenge, and we want to say thank you. Now, please, I would ask that you wait, and at this point, I would like to open up the public hearing.
Did y'all have any questions before I step away? Or you want me to?
Yeah, let us do the public hearing. We're going to call people up, and then we'll close the public hearing, and then answer any questions as come. So, Sham Shutu, did I get it right?
Yes, close enough.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and council members for allowing me to speak today. My name is Sham Chotu, and I'm the cricket commissioner for the Bowie Boys and Girls Club. And what I wanted to do today is give you some background information on our cricket program that we've had here to see why it's important to have a cricket field at the racetrack property. Joe just mentioned a few words about cricket, but I think it's really important for us to have a cricket field there. And in 2012, we started the Bowie Boys and Girls started its cricket program in 2012, and in 2014, we partnered with PG County Schools to form the first elementary school cricket league in the entire country. And then in 2015, we formed the first middle school cricket league in the entire country. Then in 2017, we formed the first all-girls cricket league in the entire country. Nowhere else was this happening, and this cricket program just reverberated throughout the entire country. When people have been hearing about what we've been doing, they say kids in Bowie have the opportunity to play for their school team. And this year, Greenbelt Elementary School won the elementary school championship game. But over the past 10 years, Whitehall Elementary School has been dominating the cricket program. They won 5 of the 8 championships. And Heather Hills was the first school to win the 2014 championship. Now, over the past 11 years, we've had 1,100 kids play cricket in our school program. And these are just Bowie residents, right? And 777 are boys, 322 were girls playing cricket, okay? And that we've expanded our cricket program to other parts of PG County, to Greenbelt Elementary School, University Park Elementary School, Cora Rice Elementary School, and then we went out to Annapolis to Tyler Heights Elementary School. We expanded our program to Howard County. We had middle school teams and elementary school teams from Howard County. We went as far as Chantilly, Virginia, and started an elementary school program there. So if we include the kids from outside of PG County, it's 2,140 kids over the past 11 years playing cricket, and 597 were girls. Okay, so we've been, really more than double the number of female cricketers in the whole country. And because of this, we've had one girl from PG County. She has made it all the way to the U.S. Women's National Cricket Team. She made it to the national cricket, and then one other girl, the first girl was from PG County, the second girl is from Howard County, and she went all the way to the under-19 cricket team. And they've traveled around the world playing cricket, and they started in our program, right? And it's all in Bowie. This is the genesis was in Bowie, okay? So next week, Major League Cricket is starting. They're having their team. We have a Major League Cricket team in the Washington, D.C. area, the Washington Freedom. For the past 2 years, we've had minor league cricket in the USA, and they've been, we have the D.C. Hawks. So what I would like to see is give more opportunities for our kids to play professional cricket, okay? And, I don't know if you know, but cricket is the second most popular sport in the world. Not in the country, in the world, the second most popular sport, with more than 2.5 billion people playing cricket, all right? And we're having Major League Cricket starting next week. The matches will be in in Houston, Texas, and in North Carolina, because right now we don't have the proper fields to play professional cricket here in Maryland. But we're trying to change that. The Washington Freedom and the DC Hawks, they're trying to build the appropriate field for that. So I want to, tell you that cricket is really up and coming, and we really need to have the right facilities. At Whitehall Elementary School, at Kennelwood Elementary School, and Rockledge Elementary School, we have cricket fields there, and these are youth cricket fields. So they work for our younger kids, 11 and under, 13 and under, even 15 and under. But we really need a larger field for the older kids, like the 17U kids and the 15U kids, because these are the kids who go on to play for the national teams, right? And so I am also the chairman of the Maryland Youth Cricket Association, and this year we had 75 teams, 75 youth cricket teams. Okay, I'm almost done. 75 cricket teams from the, and with 864 kids and 112 girls playing this year alone. So we really need a larger fields to get the, to get the program moving forward. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for what you're doing for cricket in Prince George's County.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Dennis Brady.
Good evening, Mayor Adams and Council. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on the proposal for the racetrack. It's been a long time coming, and I see this as taking it across the finish line, if you will. The 10 councils I was on, we always talked to our elected officials, Senator Green, Delegates Pitkin, Hubbard, and Conway, about how can we integrate the racetrack into the city. And especially as the Maryland Jockey Club activities were winding down. And we actually had an attempt 15 years ago where we thought we were going to be able to buy it from the Jockey Club. That fell apart. So commend all those then and now. Senator Peters had an instrumental part in moving it forward to getting us to this day, along with Delegate Holmes and Geraldine Valentino Smith. So I want to thank everyone who was involved, especially the citizens that participated in the task force and the members of the task force. But I think in all, we need to remember the importance of the equestrian history of that site. Because remember, it made Bowie 30, 40, 50 years ago. It was a significant part of the community, of the history. But I'm very glad to see the involvement with Bowie State University, the urban farms, and the ROTC facility, I think, are excellent additions to it. And I fully support the task force recommendations and staff's comments in support of that. As you move forward with this, and I'm sure you'll do that because I know in Bowie this always happens, you need to make sure you keep the citizens engaged, get their feedback, get their involvement, get their support, and it'll make your job a lot easier. Also, be aware of the traffic impact along this area. I know Mr. Minor talked about it, but it's a serious problem in that area, so you need to make sure that whatever is done, that the appropriate traffic calming or other methodologies are incorporated in the plans that move forward. And there was a mention about the delaying the conveyance of the property for a year and the $100,000 and the issue about any biohazards and what have you. That was, as I said, we attempted to purchase the property from the Maryland Jockey Club. And one of the big concerns we had was what is on that property. There's building materials. When the things were built, they probably used asbestos. They had the horses there, so you had chemicals and what have you in support, as well as the excrements and what have you that came from them. So we were always very concerned about what we could possibly find on the property once we obtain ownership of it, and then it would be our dime. And moving forward, it'll be the citizens' dime on that. So you need to be careful with that. As well as I would strongly support all the evaluation criteria that was listed in that. Three real quick final points. Whatever is done, I think you need to ensure that the Patuxent River is protected. This can be a very nice and compatible thing along the side, but you need to make sure that the river is compatible. One of the frustrations I had when I was on the council was it seemed that the city's public art tended to be at City Hall. You had the sundial out front, you've got the mobile that doesn't move, you've got several things along the pond mac here that are all well and appropriate, but we need to move some of that public art out into the community, and I think this site would give you several opportunities to convey through public art the history of the facility, the equestrian history. And you might want to consider looking into appropriate markings in the way of historical markers for the site for the different things that went on over time. But again, I'm glad to see this day finally arriving. I'm looking forward to the final product, and I wish you well in your endeavors. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. That is the last speaker we have, so I will declare the public hearing closed at this time. I'll now entertain questions from, if we have any questions from any of the council members. Councilman Estelle?
Yes.
I'm happy to
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Couple quick questions. First of all, thank you to everybody that participated in the program. So far, it's been absolutely fantastic to see the participation and the results. There were a number of uses specified or indicated. Given its proximity to the watershed, is the surface there for these fields going to be a permeable surface, or are we talking about synthetic fields?
Well, we hadn't really gotten that far into it because we think that, once we get to the point of designing, we will look at what type of fields will actually be best there. I think there was a discussion both for and against synthetic fields, but that would have to be contained in a way that it wouldn't have the runoff and the actual debris from that would not make it to the waterways or to any other parts of the park.
Yeah. And I noted that you also have a presence remaining from the actual track itself. What would that surface be for that area?
Well, we were thinking of that track being kind of like a walking track or a track that, people could use to ride bikes on. We're a little concerned about people riding bikes on it alongside people walking. So we're looking at different ways. There's multiple setups there. Keeping that track at a mile would be a little long for people to use, just to want to go out and do a little light walking. But we have looked at multiple ways of reducing that and causing ways of passing through the actual middle of the fields and stuff like that. So it's more of a, it's still up in the air, it's kind of open. We didn't want to lock down and say this is exactly how we're going to do this, but we do know that it will not stay in the same condition it is in right now. So it would probably be some type of permeable surface, but not a hard concrete surface and not a straight dirt surface.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to see that there's good thought being put into that. I personally think that there ought to be some elements that are retained, from the rail and on the inside and the outside in various spots to kind of demonstrate what the original facility looked like, to give people the understanding, the scope, the width of that track. It's if you walk down on a track there, it's pretty impressive, and you realize how far it is. So it's I won't be running the laps on that one. Thank you very much, and again, thank you to the entire team.
Thank you for your question.
Any other questions from council members?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say a really big thank you to you, Mr. Day, to Mr. Coley with Bowie State University. I don't think we have anyone here from Maryland National Capital Park and Planning, but folks from the various recreation communities, and to all the volunteers from Bowie and elsewhere. When we put this together, what feels like 10 years ago, our goal really was to make sure that we got as many of the stakeholders as we could in the room. There are a lot of different groups who, based on state legislation, have a vested interest in this. And really, we just want to make sure that all those groups are working together so that whatever may come in the coming months and potentially in the coming years as the Maryland Jockey Club and the Maryland State Legislature figures out what they want to do going forward, that at a bare minimum, Bowie had a plan, and that plan had the stamp of approval from all of the stakeholders involved, and I think you guys have done that. I know that nothing we ultimately propose will satisfy all parties totally. I know that for sure. I attended many of the planning meetings and work sessions and caught a lot of earfuls, as I know you did, Mr. Day, and I'm sure many of the others did, from various communities that felt to varying levels that their amenities were not be given higher priority. But what I will say is all throughout this process, I think everyone on the task force did a really good job listening, making sure that those stakeholders that would sometimes come to meetings with some concerns felt actually heard, and that you guys really did a great job incorporating as many things as possible, as reasonably as possible, into a plan. Going forward, you know, assuming everything goes at pace and the City of Bowie and Bowie State University are jointly managing this property with Maryland National Capital Park and Planning in a couple of short years, none of this will happen overnight. It'll take years and years of getting through permitting. I see a member of our county council here. It'll take years of funding. I see a member of our House of Delegates here to stand a lot of these programs up. But at a bare minimum, we will have a plan and something to work with that has some buy-in. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll just say thank you to our delegation. What people don't understand is the money they give us will help us to figure out what's under the ground, which will tell us what we can do above the ground. So we have to do a little work there.
Mr. Day, just wow, this is absolutely, I'm going to speak as a millennial, dope, and this is absolutely great. And what you've come up with the end product is just, what the team has come up with is really, really well thought out and just inclusive of our community needs and a lot of the feedback that we've heard over the last couple of years. So very much so thoroughly impressed. And also I will say, like, what's so beautiful about this recommendation is the inclusion of Bowie State University. I've been dying for us to work with Bowie State University over the last couple of years, and to see the inclusion and how this would really target some of the things that they're also trying to do as a university, and also incorporating our multi-generational community component where you have activities for people of all different walks of life, all different ages, and things for them to do in a, you know, collaborative manner is very beautiful to see. I do have a couple of things that, just two questions, but two things that I want to point out really quickly and just draw home for the community. On the proposal for the urban farming, this is really, really huge for Bowie, because when you think about a lot of the sustainability goals for 2023, which the biggest ones were biodiversity conversion and sustainable agriculture, and then when you think about the opportunity in the agriculture industry like vertical farming and precision agriculture and IoT, Prince George's County is trying to invest a lot when it comes to smart cities and figuring out what we need to do with IoT and what our smart city stance needs to be as a county and a municipality to leverage more federal funding. So this is absolutely great that it encompasses everything that we've been talking about over the last couple of years. And also for the urban farming component, we do have food insecurity here. There is a large pocket of that in Prince George's County. So to be able to leverage that, to think more deeply and intentional, to do research there with Bowie State University and leverage the students, I think that's absolutely wonderful. The two questions that I have in regards to the plan are just, I mean, maybe this is more a question for staff, and pardon my ignorance here, and the question is just, what's the thought behind the funding of all of this? Because there are a lot of moving pieces here and a lot of components. So I'm just trying to understand, is the expectation over time, like over a 10-year horizon, that us as a municipality will be paying for all of this, or what's the funding source?
Well, I'll just say this,
I just want insight.
I'll just say that was one of the reasoning behind us making sure that we did not have a financial constraint in designing or thinking or talking about this, because we have no idea how this is going to happen. And it will require as many different grants and funding as possible that we could find. So it would be something that the city would have to work with the county, the state, and federal and national granting opportunities that we would just have to really go out there and work the system.
Okay, and let me just take a step back really quickly, Mr. Mayor, and give you clarity behind why I asked the question. Is when you guys were going through the study and the exercise with staff, I didn't know if that was part of it or if staff did a further deep dive in that to propose something to council. So that's why I'm asking to see if there's any missing pieces that we have moving that we don't know about. So that was the clarity.
We can always sit down and talk with staff. That's not a problem. Staff was involved in this. All your different departments can ask any questions they want. We're willing to sit down, talk with them, and work through it. That's not a problem.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real quick, Mr. Day, Mr. Coley, Dan, Joe, thank you for all your work on this, and to all the task force members, thank you all for committing your time, volunteering your thoughts and resources on this. There's just this watching this and being a part of this. I was only in a few meetings. It was great to see the community come together, different stakeholders, different people from varying points of view come together to iron out a very comprehensive idea of what we should be doing at the racetrack. And with regards to funding and permitting and all that stuff, that's kind of on us and our local, state, and federal partners, but you all did your job, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. I'll just say one last thing, Mr. Mayor. We talked about recreational uses here. I always like to think of this project as a mind, body, and soul type of project, because there's the education, there's the physical activity, and there's the peace and tranquility that you can see throughout this project. So you can think of it that way also.
At this time, hearing no other question, I did want to make sure that council remembered, and everyone, that we entrusted this task force to make recommendations and ideas on what we could do to bring back to us as a council to make decisions on how we're going to do it. So that's why I was saying when it comes to money and what we can actually afford to do, what we can do with Bowie State, the funding, all of those things, were not things that we tasked the task force to do. I do want to say again, thank you to all of you. Thank you, Councilmember Hawkins, for your work. Joe Minard, I have to give you a shout out because you did a yeoman's work, as well as Derek Cooley, but all of you. Today, all of you did a great job, and we really appreciate that. And at this point, I will entertain a motion to accept the findings and recommendation of the task force regarding the future recreational uses of the Bowie racetrack property for the council to take into consideration.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to accept the findings and recommendation of the Bowie Racetrack Task Force regarding the future recreational uses of the racetrack property.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Can we add in the provision? Can we add in the provision to accept the recommendations from staff as well? The modifications proposed by staff?
Yes, and I consider that part of the report, but yes. Joe, your comments are part of the report, correct?
Yes, we would recommend that you adopt the staff recommendation on page 1 of the report,
Right,
which is to endorse the concept plan, the supporting information from the task force with the 2 modifications and the additional items that I covered.
I was just clarifying that was in the report, so.
Yes.
Okay. So.
I think it needs to be. I think it needs to be in the motion.
You think what?
I think that clarification needs to be in the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
That's fine.
I will amend my motion. I'd like to move that we accept the Bowie Racetrack Property Task Force with the amendments from staff included on page 1 regarding the future of the racetrack property.
Which are included in the report.
Yeah.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries, and thank you. I would like all of the members of the task force who are here to please come up front. Have some certificates, some proclamation, certificates of appreciation from the city that I had them draw up. We can be all that. And I'll pass it on to Will. And this is for Tanya Edspeth. Okay. Karen Johnson Shaheed. Darrell Williford.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, Senator, get a picture. All right? Just stand there. Michelle Balfe. She's not here. Okay. Michael Lagua. Don't you call my name. All right, just stand up. Thank you so much. Linda Bailey. Carl Sturman. Too many times. Up there. Kevin Taschenberger. Huh? Karen. Wait, let's try it again. Karen Taschenberger. Oh, here you are. Give me a break. Abigail Snyder. Patricia Taylor. Mariam Hamza. Lieutenant Colonel Corinne Fernandez. He's in Louisville. Dr. George Hude. He's not here. Okay. Derek Cooley. Hey. Thank you for all your leadership. Clyde Doty. Sir. Good. Sharita Clark. Robert W. Day. Thank you again for everything. Rick Cormier. Thank you. Lyman Billingsley. Charles McIntosh. I wonder who that is. There you go. Now, if we could all kind of, let's move over a little bit this way and try to all kind of get together so we get a picture. We are really, really proud of this staff and all the work we did. Come on, y'all gotta come over here. Let's go forward and then tell the guys to get in the back. So you are not one of the time. You've got space now.
Okay.
Can we see everybody? That's good.
Say when. Ready? Go.
Joe, you need to get out of here.
I
just said the same thing. I said the same thing on Saturdays.
No. That's a request from the mayor. Having said that, Delegate, why don't you get in with us?
You got to.
No. We want to say, you knew about the money we needed to get. very, very much. That was a lot.
You're welcome.
Work.
I would like to state one more time how appreciative we are of the collaboration between Bowie State University, our task force, and our city staff. I think it just shows to go the kind of community we have and the relationship building that we're doing and how positive this can be for all of us. So thank you all again for everything you've done. We will now move on to item C, retail centers in Bowie. Mark Menick, president of KLNB and a retail development management and leasing expert, will provide council with a briefing on retail center development, leasing, and operation, and he will talk about why landlords select the tenants they pick and what the tenants look for in a location. John Henry, did you have anything you needed to add before we got started?
You did my job, sir. Thank you.
All righty. Well, we'll turn it over to you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, John, for inviting me to come speak, and thank you guys for all, and gals for all that you do. It's really impressive to watch. I don't get to sit in these rooms very often, but for everything that you do for the community, it's pretty impressive to see. So thank you for what you do. Good evening. I will be brief. I know I'm last, and I know everybody's tired and wants to go home, including me. So I will be brief. But again, thank you. My name, as you mentioned, is Mark Menick. I'm the president and COO of KLNB, a retail brokerage firm I'm based in Tysons Corner, Virginia. I was born in Prince George's County, so I know where the emphasis on Prince George's comes from, and spent many years working for a legendary developer by the name of Milt Peterson that built National Harbor. And I spent a lion's share of my career making that development happening and bringing all the retail, dining, and entertainment that you come to see at National Harbor. So why am I here? I'm here to explain why landlords choose the tenants that they choose to occupy their shopping centers, and why tenants choose to go into certain locations. And spoiler alert, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. I've been in this business for 30 years, and I'm still trying to figure it out for myself. So, but hopefully I can give you some insight into some of the variables that go into the decision making. I think before I get started, it's important to know how to click forward. And now that I figured that out, it's important to understand, not all retail is created equal, not all tenants are created equal, not all shopping center locations are created equal. There's a lot of different types of shopping centers and retail destinations that are out there, as you guys have in this jurisdiction at Free State Shopping Center, Power Regional Center, or luxury lifestyle centers like we have here, Bowie Town Center, grocery anchored centers like Bowie Marketplace, or freestanding retails or pad sites, regional malls, and a variety of other centers. And with each one of those, different decisions go into the types of tenants that go into them. Understanding tenant mix is an important component of it too, when landlords are deciding who they want to occupy space within their shopping center. It's important to understand the tenant mix that goes in, and not all tenants will go. There's a reason why you see some of the same tenants in some of the same locations. Some of the same tenants gravitate towards grocery anchored centers. Some of the same tenants gravitate towards entertainment destination type centers. And understanding that is very, very important, and the goals of the tenants and the the landlords are very, very important to create sort of a mix of local and national, make sure that those uses are synergistic and compatible, so that they maximize foot traffic and maximize sales and customer satisfaction. Understanding tenant mix is important, understanding the makeup of retail owners and investors is important as well. Not all owners are created equal. Different owners, there's different types of owners of all these different centers. You've got major REITs, publicly traded REITs. You've got local owners, local investors. Some retailers actually own the buildings in which they occupy. And those motivations of all those individuals are very, very different. And it's important to understand that. So where does our company come into the equation? I know this isn't a sales pitch and I don't want it to be, but I think it's important to understand what we do. We are not the tenants. We are not the owners. We're sort of advisors in between. We help the owners and we help the tenants make those best decisions possible, make the best decisions possible about where they should go and why they should go there. And so we represent all different types of owners and landlords in this jurisdiction and throughout the region. And that's what KLMB does. So why do tenants gravitate towards certain locations? I mentioned some of them. Foot traffic is one of them. Vehicular traffic, of course, accessibility, convenience, demographics, proximity to competitors. Sometimes they like to be near their competitors. Sometimes they like to be as far as possible from those competitors. Anchor tenants are always just a huge consideration. There's a reason why everybody wants the best, a Wegmans in their neighborhood or a giant grocery anchored center as opposed to maybe a more local supermarket, because the people that surround it are of a certain caliber when it's a higher caliber anchor that drives more foot traffic. So a variety of factors go into a tenant's decision on where they want to go. And so what goes into a landlord's decision as to what tenants they want to put in the center? A ton of variables. Obviously, the financial stability of that tenant, the tenant mix, like I talked about, a mix between local and nationals, the reputation or the branding, or the build out of that particular tenant is a factor. The financial stability of that tenant is a factor, their creditworthiness, their track record, and most importantly is the mentality and motivation of that owner. Unfortunately, not all owners are there to do what's necessarily best for the community. It's the honest truth. They're there to make a dollar. If you're fortunate enough to have an owner and investor in your community that cares not only about the short-term dollar, but the long-term value of a community, then you're blessed to have a great owner. I used to work for one for 20 years, and we represent a ton of them. Unfortunately, there's a lot of owners out there that aren't motivated that way, whether it be because of their stakeholders or their shareholders don't allow them to be, or it's just not in their best interest because they're not a part of your community. It's just the nature of the beast. And so we use all sorts of variety of tools to communicate to the landlords and to the tenants in order to make the best match possible, such as these aerial photographs and whatnot, and different demographic studies and trade area studies that all go into the determination of what gets decided. This day and age, we're all walking around with a GPS device in our pocket. So now more than ever, tenants and landlords can determine very clearly who the customer profile is, where they're coming from, where the competitors are, and we're able to, when we're representing these locations, we're able to sit down with those tenants or those landlords and compare your community to other communities where they may have locations throughout the country. And so that was a very, very quick overview as to sort of what goes into the decision-making behind what landlords do and what tenants do when they decide where to go. It is absolutely an art and not a science, and every owner has different motivations and every tenant has different motivations, and unfortunately they don't always align specifically with what all the stakeholders in the community want. Often they do, and usually those ones last longer, but often they don't. And us as advisors, we do our best to align what the tenants want with what the landlords want and what the community wants. So that's my very quick synopsis of what I was told to come here and educate you on, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, my question is very obvious, that I'm going to take you down the rabbit hole. What should we be doing here in the city of Bowie to enhance our status when we start talking about landlords and new businesses and other things?
Get to know your landlords. Get to know your landlords.
Okay.
Get out in the community and get to know your landlords and find out what their motivations are. Because simply stating or communicating what your needs are or what you understand for your constituents' needs to be may not be heard until maybe they hear or they know that you're listening and what their needs are. And so that would be my that would be my knee-jerk advice.
Yeah, because one of the things is in trying to do that, even myself, getting out there, sometimes we don't get to the true landlords.
Yeah.
And that becomes the challenge, as they may not be located here locally, but we're needing to figure out how do we get in touch with them? How do we get through the gatekeepers? Is one of those things, and you may not be able to help us with that, but if you have some suggestions, I would be glad, even if you just sent me some suggestions, I'd be glad to hear them, so that we can figure out how to get past some of those gatekeepers.
Yeah. More often than not, we can help you. Sometimes they're just massive bureaucracies, and even we don't know who is making the ultimate decisions. But more often than not, I'm going to make up a percentage, more than 50% of the time, we can find the decision maker that's deciding upon what's going where.
Okay.
So we can help you with that. We'd be happy to help you with that.
I appreciate that. Okay. Any other questions, Madam Pro Tem?
I have a few questions. First off, thank you so much for being with us all the way from Tyson's late on a Monday night.
I live on the Maryland side.
Oh, okay, good.
I'm in Bethesda, Maryland, so it's
still,
not
that's
too
still
far.
all right, and it's
It
10
is still all
p.m.
right,
So
but it's all
appreciate
right.
you for sticking it through.
I love
with us.
seeing this. I don't get to see this very often.
It's so awesome. One, very familiar with your company. In fact, your team has been super helpful on Pointer Ridge Plaza, which is in my district. I've had a couple of preliminary conversations with them about, like, assessing opportunity there, trying to understand competing interests, everything that you're alluding to, because in South Bowie, that's one of the biggest retail anchors on that side of the house that has been, I would definitely say, a sore spot for my community. So I really, really appreciate your team for all the support and the help that they've been providing from an insights perspective there. For me, I have a couple of questions, because your presentation was really, really insightful. But before
Yeah, sorry I ran through it quickly, but
Oh, no, it's okay. We read through it prior to. Before I basically kind of share, there are a couple of data points that I want to point out for the community, because I think they'll be super helpful. Within a 15-mile radius, we have an estimated population surrounding Bowie within a 15-mile radius of 1,641,060. That's within a 15-mile radius. Like, that's huge from an opportunity perspective. This is not in your presentation. This is my data points. I know you were looking for it.
I'm looking for it.
And then when you think about just within a 5-mile radius, you have a median income of $152,000 within a 5-mile radius. And then when you think about just all up, like, different types of breakdowns that we have, like, this is such a vibrant community, and the opportunity on this side of Maryland is huge for us. And so you've talked about a couple of areas that I want to ask you questions on. The first one being more focused on economic development market trends. From my understanding and my research, which could be limited because I'm not an economic development professional, I've seen that the trends are gravitating a little bit more away from retail, like traditional brick and mortar, and moving more towards the educational space, the more educational space for, like, community type centers, wellness, biotech, things of that sort. So do you, based off of the presentation that you put together, is there an area that we should be targeting for the Bowie Town Center that we are not currently targeting today that would be helpful for that mall? like based off of your just perspective?
For specifically the town center.
Yeah,
not
but
just
it
for
could honestly just be Bowie. Let's not make it specific.
I'll answer it sort of indirectly, maybe. And in order to drill down on specific needs and uses for the town center, maybe it's something that we can do later with an expert that knows that market even a little bit better than I do, that lives and breathes it every day. But what I will say is, before, in preparation for today, over the weekend and earlier today, I was talking to my team, the team that lists and represents the shopping centers in your jurisdictions. And the common theme that I heard was that it's an amazing market. It has all of those things that you mentioned, plus more. Regionality, access to, major arteries, amazing densities, amazing demographics, educational, the types of people that live there. It's an amazing confluence of things that all these retailers look for. The biggest challenge right now, frankly, and it's shocking to hear, but there's not enough supply for the amount of demand, frankly. And you may say, well, there's this vacancy over here that's been empty forever. I'm not saying that every vacancy is filled, because they're not all created equal. Yeah. But the challenge with retail in some of these better markets like yours is almost since the advent of the internet, we, meaning the development community, has stopped building retail because we've all been scared that it was going to go away. If COVID did anything, it proved that bricks and mortar retail is here to stay, and it's an absolute necessity to supplement your online presence. Otherwise, you can't survive. And that's why Amazon is opening up supermarkets and trying everything possible to become profitable, because they can't necessarily even compete with Walmart that has these footprints everywhere. So anyways, my point is that we haven't built enough retail. This is a macro statement. And in this jurisdiction included, it's really a supply issue. There's a ton of demand for more retail in this market. There's not a ton of supply, good supply that some of the better retailers need, and then when that happens, the other ones follow.
Okay, 2 more follow-up questions.
I don't know how you solve it, but that's the issue.
2 more follow-up questions. The next one is based on some of the retailers that you listed here. What I'm trying to get a better understanding is I'm trying to assess our positioning as a municipality. That's where my question is coming from, perspective-wise. So from what you're seeing with this presentation, does the opportunity cost when it comes to brand marketing for the retailer, let's take Lululemon or Nordstrom's, for example, does the brand marketing of being located in a marquee city with proximity to such a population size outweigh the potential losses of them going into brick and mortar and expanding in brick and mortar? Or do we have an opportunity to be able to attract retailers like that, like quality retailers like that, to our municipality based on the fact of its proximity, density, proximity to income levels, things of that sort? Like, does it outweigh the con for them on the loss that brick and mortar might possess for them?
You got a number of things going for you, which is all those retailers that you just mentioned, the Lululemons of the world, they are vacating enclosed malls. That's the big trend right now, which is like plus for Bowie Town Center. The challenge that you've got is the lack of sort of the anchors that they want. Yeah. They're going to follow. They don't care how many people you have, how wealthy you are, or how good the shoppers are, how educated they are. That's all great. Check that box. But now they need their anchors, and they're not going to just go until a whole bunch of their friends go. Retailers are not pioneers.
We learned that at ICSC. Thank you so much for emphasizing. Yeah. So I guess you would say maybe I don't know if the answer is that we need to work with a consultant or a firm down the line, but I guess so. Then how do you create that bait to be able to get them to follow if we don't have it today?
Yeah. It's a lot of hard work. It takes time. I would continue to attend those events. I understand you guys went to the ICSC event, but that's like the Super Bowl, right? You got to go to all the games before the Super Bowl too. And there's, we can talk offline, there's other sort of local shows to go to. We just got to stay in front. And the good news is we've got a universe that's pretty well understood. We can get to all these owners and get in front of them frequently and often, because there's not a ton of them. I mean, we're only talking about 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 places where these types of retailers that you're talking about could possibly go. So it's just staying in front of them consistently and constantly.
Yeah, just to highlight what you're saying, I think there's a huge opportunity, because when I took a look at our void analysis, and for everybody watching, void analysis basically identifies the gaps in specific businesses and services in an area compared to other similar areas. So when I looked at it, there was a huge opportunity of stores, retailers, restaurateurs, and things of that sort that we could be attracting. I guess where I'm stuck on, because I like solutions, where I'm stuck is like the bait to be able to get everybody else to follow and figure out how to kind of turn the ship. And I think what also sometimes might hurt for us is that some of these, from what I've observed, it seems like a lot of these top tier retailers like these brand new developments where it's like highly saturated or it looks of a particular perception. Let's just put it like that.
Absolutely.
And for some of our infrastructure, that's just not what that is. So it's also like, how do you work with those shopping center owners to understand what's incentivizing them or what they're driven by to get them to renovate these areas, to attract the quality retailers who want to be in these new establishments? So it's like a lot of competing interests that seem to be at play here, where it's like, okay, what's the solution? Like, how do we crack this puzzle? And so I think that's where my mind is. And I think the other thing too, which your team highlighted that was really awesome for me, is I think in the past, and I'm not saying the city has done this, but there's been this narrative of, oh, affluent community, as opposed to the emphasis of a blended community. Yeah. You have multiple different types of interests and proximity to so many different things, whether that's College Park, being in such proximity, you have UMD, you've got Bowie State, you've got 301, you've got 50, you've got all these things, and everybody kind of going past Bowie and through Bowie to be able to get to whatever locations, whether that's work, home, whatever that looks like. And so I think highlighting the opportunity there of a blended community and not just driving home on affluency. So it's just a different positioning and a different narrative for us to be able to show the opportunity of what could be here. But I think where I'm stuck is just how do you create that bait to get everybody else to follow?
Yeah, the retailers are gonna, no disrespect, but the retailers are gonna listen to the owners first, right? So I think we gotta get to the owners. Figure out, back to what I said initially, what is your motivation? What is your reinvestment plan? What are you doing with that vacant anchor? Are you gonna upgrade the facades? Just try and understand what their motivations are. We can try and help with that, because you guys are in a really, really tough position in trying to talk to the tenants, because they've got jurisdictions all over the country that want them, right? But they are gonna listen to the owner, because the owner of the centers typically have them in a couple other locations, and they have some leverage over them.
But also I will tell you, because my conversation is not even with the tenants anymore, because they're leaseholders. Some of them don't even own those properties. Right. It's with the owners of the actual shopping centers themselves, and some of their strategies are just a buy and hold. And so if it's a buy and hold, I have no plans to reinvest or no plans to revitalize, because that's just not my strategy. It doesn't appeal to me and what my interest is. Okay. So it's also like, how do you create this incentivization to change the interest and like not take this buy and hold stance and, you know, further this idea of dilapidation and get them to pivot in a very different way. So, I mean, of course, yes, it's all strategy, yes, it's positioning, but that's kind of like the challenge that I'm observing as I have more of these conversations.
Yeah, unfortunately, if you've got an owner that's unwilling to reinvest, you're at a dead-end road. However, if we do this a few times and we recognize that, well, Lulu would go to that location if they would reinvest and replace that anchor with some, and another person would, well, we're not going to do it there because that owner isn't motivated. Well, maybe we can get enough of these and create something ourselves somewhere else. And you don't, you can't do it with one, but you can do it with 3 or 4. And so it's part of the process, starting with the owner, I think, understanding their motivations, understanding which tenants are attracted to the market that can't find a home, and then if we can't put them there, maybe we put them across the street or somewhere else.
And just last point, Mr. Mayor, for staff, it would just be interesting for the roundtable discussion that we have coming up to probably add like this talk track as one of the topics of just like understanding what that strategy is from these shopping center owners for certain shopping centers that are in the city of Bowie. So that could be also like a topic point for that roundtable.
You should also look at communities of which you think you're similar to, that have it and you don't. Who do you envy? And then I can tell you probably very quickly, or somebody on my team can tell you very quickly, who owns those centers, those nodes in which you're envious of. And we could talk to them too. Hey, have you thought of investing in Bowie? We know that this tract of land or this shopping center or whatever, you could buy it. I live in just outside of Bethesda, and Eden's is a great company. They took over an older shopping center, and they've spent the past 4 years. It looks like another place. It's beautiful now because they bought it from an old family and reinvested and spent $1 bazillion to make it what it is today. So that's another approach.
I will literally tell you what you're saying is music to my ears because that's exactly what your team did for me on Pointer Ridge Plaza.
Yeah.
Like literally,
A smaller scale.
There's
Yeah.
on a much smaller scale. It's a
Yeah.
much smaller shopping center at a different price point. But that's exactly I mean, I got the analysis from somewhere else, another firm. But
Yeah.
your team kind of helped me understand. I know who the owners are. I've spoken to their representatives, and now it's like, okay, let's see if they can be bought out.
It's a multi-pronged approach. You got to talk to your existing owners, and if that's a dead end, which it probably is going to be, then you need to talk to the owners in which you would like to invest in your market, and they know if you're friendly, they're gonna be a little bit more interested. And then it's the tenant community, and yeah, I know it's not a sales pitch, but that's what we do. We connect all those dots.
Thank you.
Councilman Staff.
It's very late, and I know you've got a long commute home. I also am terrified to get the bill from you tomorrow for all this free advice that we're getting.
We don't get paid unless deals are done, so you're not going to get a bill from me.
Fair enough. How many projects have you done recently in Prince George's County? Your firm?
Well, now I want to clarify projects done. I mean, my previous role, I was with the Peterson companies. We were a developer.
Right.
We did projects from ground up. At KLMB, we're real estate advisors.
Right.
We help the landlords do the projects, as you say. And so we, off the top of my head, we are probably currently listing or representing in Prince George's County right now, retail centers or retail locations, probably 4 dozen. I would say about 40 locations. If you go on our website and you can figure it out. How many have we done helped the owners do from ground up? Or how many are we doing right now? I could probably count on one hand, 4 or 5.
Right. So obviously we don't control land use. We don't control permitting in Bowie. The county does. Are there any specific issues that you tend to run into with Prince George's County when it comes to any of those? Because, be blunt, I talk to business owners all the time, and I hear one thing about Prince George's, which is we will not do business with them ever again because their permitting process was designed somewhere in the lower pits of hell. And they don't know, I mean, how do you tell your investors, I might need anywhere from 10 to 40 million bucks, and I might have anywhere from 6 months to 2 years to get a permit? How do you
It's a big problem, and I'm glad you mentioned it. It's a huge problem, and you're absolutely right. That sentiment is out there amongst a lot of.
Would you say it's an accurate sentiment, though?
I would say it's an accurate sentiment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions from anyone? Hearing none, I'd like to say thank you for being here this evening on behalf of myself and the entire council. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All righty. At this time, I'd like to thank staff and all who participated today. Again, thank you so very much for being here, Delegate Holmes, and for everyone. At this time, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. Everyone, please have a safe night, and thank you for coming out. And to those listening, thank you so very much.